Welcome to How To with NADTC, where we tackle your big challenges in small doses. On today's episode, we'll hear from Carrie Diamond about the basic program requirements of FTA's Enhanced Mobility for Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities, Section 5310 funding. Carrie is the Senior Director of Transportation and Mobility for Easter Seals and the Co-Director of the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. Welcome, Carrie.
Hello. Today we will be discussing the program basics of the Federal Transit Administration's Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities, Section 5310 Formula Program. The Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities, Section 5310, is designed to improve mobility for older adults and people with disabilities by removing barriers to transportation service and expanding transportation mobility options. Grants under this section can be used for the following: for public transportation capital projects planned, designed, and carried out to meet the special needs of older adults and individuals with disabilities when public transportation is insufficient, inappropriate, or unavailable. It can be used for public transportation projects that exceed the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Or for public transportation projects that improve access to existing fixed route service and decrease reliance by people with disabilities on complementary paratransit, or to provide alternatives to public transportation that assist older adults and individuals with disabilities with transportation. Funds are apportioned or divided based on each state's share of the population of older adults and people with disabilities, according to the latest available U.S. Census data. Formula funds are apportioned to direct recipients, which are states and designated recipients. In rural and small urban areas, the direct recipient is usually the State Department of Transportation. In large urban areas, a designated recipient is chosen by the government. 60% of the funds shall be apportioned among designated recipients for large urbanized areas with a population of 200,000 or more individuals as determined by the Bureau of the Census. 20% of the funds shall be apportioned in small urban areas. 20% of the funds shall be apportioned in rural areas. These are all based on the ratio of the number of older adults and individuals with disabilities in each state to the number of older adults and individuals with disabilities in each area in all states. The way this works is that while you may have a high number of older adults and people with disabilities in any of these designated areas, the funds that may be available to your state are compared to the number of older adults and people with disabilities in other states. They may proportionately have more and therefore may receive more funding, despite the high number of older adults and people with disabilities in your area or state. The term subrecipient means an eligible entity that receives a grant under Section 5310 indirectly through a recipient. Eligible subrecipients for traditional Section 5310 projects include private nonprofit organizations or state and local government authorities that are approved by a state to coordinate services for older adults and people with disabilities, or certifies that there are no private nonprofit organizations readily available in the area to provide the services. Eligible subrecipients for non-traditional or other Section 5310 projects include private nonprofit organizations, states and local government authorities, or operators of public transportation. Direct recipients have flexibility in how they select subrecipient projects for funding, but the selection process must be in the state program management plan. The amount of funding available for capital projects, also known as traditional projects, shall not be less than 55% of the funds apportioned to the recipient under this section. This means that no more than 45% of a recipient's apportionment can be used for non-traditional or other Section 5310 funds. Some examples of capital or traditional Section 5310 projects include buses and vans and maintenance, tires and facilities, wheelchair lifts, ramps and securement devices, transit-related information, technology systems, including scheduling, routing, and one-call systems, mobility management programs, pedestrian and bicycle access to a public transportation facility, and acquisition of transportation services under a contract, lease, or other arrangement. Traditional activities are capital-only projects. Some examples of non-traditional Section 5310 projects include travel training, volunteer driver programs, building an accessible path to a bus stop, including curb cuts, sidewalks, accessible pedestrian signals, or other accessibility features, improving signage or wayfinding technology, and incremental costs of providing same-day service or door-to-door service. Non-traditional funds can be used for capital or operating activities. The federal share of eligible capital costs may not exceed 80%, and the federal share of eligible operating costs may not exceed 50%. Local funds that can be used to match the federal funds can include undistributed cash, a service agreement with a state or local social service agency, or a private social service organization, other governmental or federal funds eligible to be expended for transportation, or in-kind contributions. The Coordinating Council on Access and Mobility, or CCAM, created a federal fund grading guide that identifies federal programs that may be used for match funding for human services transportation for older adults, people with disabilities, and individuals of low income for 61 programs across CCAM agencies. Before receiving a grant under this section, each recipient shall certify that all projects using Section 5310 funds are included in a locally developed, coordinated public transit human services transportation plan. The plan must be developed and approved through a process that includes participation by older adults, people with disabilities, representatives of public, private, and nonprofit transportation and human services providers, and other members of the general public. To the extent feasible, services funded under 5310 will be coordinated with transportation services assisted by other federal departments or agencies. One example of coordination is that FTA's Section 5310 program allows grantees to coordinate and assist in regularly providing meal delivery service for individuals unable to leave their homes. If the delivery service does not conflict with providing public transportation services or reduce service to public transportation passengers. The Coordinating Council on Access and Mobility, or CCAM, is a federal interagency council that works to coordinate funding and provide expertise on human services transportation for three targeted populations: people with disabilities, older adults, and individuals of low income. The CCAM's mission is to issue policy recommendations and implement activities that improve the availability, accessibility, and efficiency of transportation for CCAM's targeted populations. The CCAM consists of 11 federal agencies, 9 of which have grant programs that can fund human services transportation. The CCAM released their 2023-2026 strategic plan. A link can be found in the resources section of this presentation. In addition to the federal fund grading guide, the CCAM program inventory identifies 130 federal programs that are able to provide funding for human services transportation for people with disabilities, older adults, and individuals of low income. The basic program elements of the enhanced mobility of older adults and Individuals with Disabilities, Section 5310 formula funding were reviewed in this learning short. The Section 5310 funding program in your state may look or operate differently than other areas, as each direct recipient has some flexibility to manage aspects of their program. One example of this is that while operations is an allowable expense, up to 45% of the total funding, some direct recipients only allow for capital projects to be funded. The 55% is a floor, not a ceiling. The recipients can use 100% of funding for traditional capital projects only. Many direct recipients have more requests for funding than they have funds available. For more information on how to apply, see the NADTC and FTA Section 5310 funding checklist at the NADTC website. If you are interested in applying for this funding or learning more about who to apply to, start by contacting your state Department of Transportation. This is a list of resources referenced in this learning short, where you can find additional information. Resources include the FTA Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities, Section 5310, 49 U.S. Code, Section 5310, Formula Grants for Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities, 49 U.S. Code, Section 5302, definitions including capital projects, the CCAM Fund Grading Guide, and the CCAM Strategic Plan. In addition to the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center resources and assistance, FTA funds several other technical assistance centers that have other tools to help, including the National Center for Mobility Management, the National Rural Transit Assistance Program, the National Center for Applied Transit Technology, the Mobility Innovation Collaborative, a program of the Shared Use Mobility Center, and finally, the Transit Workforce Center. Thank you for joining me for this learning short.
Thank you for watching this episode of How To with NADTC. We hope you found this information valuable and practical. Be sure to check out our other episodes in this series for more helpful tips.